Hi, my name is Nicole Bond, and I'm going to be sharing a little bit of information about open educational resources and how to both access and use them, and how we're going to be tagging them using our training and consulting staff moving forward. So just a little background about me. My name is Nicole Bond. I am the Educational Technology Specialist here at Lincoln Intermediate Unit. I've been the Educational Technology Specialist at Lincoln Intermediate Unit for the past year. I'm coming from a background of English language arts. I used to teach 7th and 8th grade ELA for 13 years in public ed. So that's essentially my background. As I was an English language arts teacher, I then moved into educational technology, and one of the things that lent me to moving into educational technology and really the utilization of technology is the idea of digitizing content and curriculum, and really open educational resources is one of the first ways that I came into this, which I'm going to talk to you guys about a little bit later. So just a couple of our meeting norms. Our goal is to engage you in any possible way. So the chat is open if you would like to leave any commentary in the chat, or you can unmute yourself if you have a question as I'm going over things. Engagement looks different to everyone. So if you can't have your video on, that gives me somebody to look at and gauge reactions from. But if that's not comfortable for you, or you're not in a situation where you can do that, I totally understand. I've got 2 kiddos running around the house right now too, so you might even hear them in the background. Our goal is also to honor all perspectives and to assume good intentions. As a reminder, you will be awarded Act 48 upon completion of the evaluation, and this is due July 31st. I will be sharing this information at the end. So our webinar outcomes today, I hope to define open educational resources for you if you're not familiar with them. I'm going to identify what Oer Commons licensing is. I'm going to help you understand tagging and searching Oer Commons for resources. So first, we're going to start with what you may or may not know about OER. So if you have any ideas about what OER is, open educational resources, I would encourage you to throw them in the chat here for a moment. Okay, I see some folks do and do not. All right. So OER stands for Open Educational Resources. My story behind OER, since I told you I was an ELA teacher, really has to do with getting rid of textbooks. So when I was an ELA teacher, I blissfully worked at a district where my opinion on textbooks was honored. And in the end, it was me and my colleague who also taught ELA at my grade level who ultimately were allowed to help make that decision on what textbook we were to purchase for our English language arts program. And one of the things that I said was, I'd really rather not have a textbook. And this is because at my district, we were going one-to-one the next 2 years. And I thought, rather than spend all of that money on a textbook that, even in ELA may last 10 years maximum, why not spend the money on the technology or on open resources in some way so that we can constantly change what we're doing with the curriculum and modify it based upon the needs of our students and the needs of the standards throughout the years that we are teaching. So essentially, I noticed that digitally, there were a lot of content resources for me to pull from. And not only did this have me saving money, but it also gave me flexibility, because I may teach one text one year, but the next year I may find that that text doesn't meet the needs of my students, that I need more diverse texts, either in leveling or even in diversity of authors. So an ELA teacher, one of the things I noticed about our oldest book was there wasn't a lot of diversity. There were a lot of white male writers that were included, even in the 1990s and the early 2000s. So one of the things that I wanted to infuse into my curriculum was diversity, to include more texts from persons of color and to include more texts by women. And by using digital content, I was able to include more of that because I was able to find it online in open resources that were open for me to use and utilize. I also found that because I had this flexibility with digital content and open resources, I could engage my learners differently. One story might work for one group of students, but the next year I might have an entirely different audience, an entirely different set of students. And I can teach theme or main idea with a multitude of texts. It doesn't always have to be this story in this textbook. As long as I was communicating it with my colleagues in my department and on my grade level, there was no problem with me switching texts or pulling in extra texts to supplement and engage and challenge students who needed challenged or support students who needed support. So open education resources really provided me that flexibility. And it's a flexibility that I didn't have when I just had a textbook and it was what was in the textbook or what I could find a photocopy of. So this idea of open educational resources really gives us access to digital content that is free and open on the web and can help elevate and change the way we're teaching in our classroom. So the open educational resources are part of a movement or a campaign by the government called the Go Open movement. This is the hashtag. If you search it on Twitter, you'll find folks sharing their ideas as well as their open educational content online. It encourages states, school districts, and educators to use OER resources, and you'll see this link right down here in the slide deck, which you can use to access more information. Additionally, this is in here as well. I'm not going to click on it and go into great detail, but if you want the background on OER, some case studies, implementation strategies, and best practices, this particular document is extremely helpful for those purposes. So open educational resources are teaching and learning materials licensed in such a way that they are free, most importantly to me, that they may be used, reused, remixed, and otherwise customized to meet the specific needs of others. So you'll notice use, reuse, remix, configure, customize, revise. So all of these resources are labeled in such a way that you can see whether, oh, I can use this directly as it is. I can reuse it after I've used it once. I can remix it, which means I can change it up to meet my needs or the needs of my learners. And the same with configure and customize and customize it so I can change it so that it, again, meets the needs of my learners. And a lot of times what'll happen is then I'll have to reshare it. Like, hey, I made this from your piece. I want to share it back to you so you know that, hey, I added this rubric, or I had this really great engagement strategy that I used with your materials that I want you to know about. We'll get a little more into that. So OER contains all of these instructional materials, from activities and labs to data sets that you can use in your classroom. An entire course can be found, games, textbooks, units of study. My colleague Ben Smith, who taught physics, always talks about how when he was getting ready to teach AP physics, they were getting ready to buy a textbook, which cost a great deal of money because it was an AP textbook. And what happened over the summer when they would have been buying the textbook, but he had kind of negotiated not to do so, what happened over the summer is they changed the standards for the AP course. So had they purchased the textbook, it wouldn't have even been to the standards anymore. But instead they used an OpenStax AP course that they found, which was an OpenStax is a type of OER textbook. And they were able to use that, and it was already reconfigured for the new standards. So by choosing to use an open educational resource, he saved the district thousands of dollars in textbook materials. So there are a lot of textbooks out there that are completely digital. CK12, OpenStax are both noted for this. And you can find these resources in OER as well. So one of the things we use to determine how we use a resource in OER are something that's like a sign. So typically when we see a sign, we know what they mean. They represent something. So we know dead end means that this road will stop. At some point, we will probably have to turn around, pull a K-turn or what have you. We know that this one down here is signifying that there's a playground that's present. And this one over here signifies that there is going to be a crossing of people. So one of the signs that we use when we're using OER is actually signals from Creative Commons. So Creative Commons is a way of marking our resources and materials regarding how we want them to be used. And there's a great video here, which I'm going to go out to so that we can view and watch it, because it really gives us a great series of background information on OER.
When you share your creativity, you're enabling people anywhere to use it, learn from it, and be inspired by it. Take the teacher who shapes young minds with work and wisdom from around the globe, and the artist who builds beauty out of bits and pieces she finds online. and the writer, whose stories use ideas and images crafted by people you've never even met. These people know that when you share your creative wealth, you can accomplish great things. They and millions of other people all around the planet are working together to build a richer, better, more vibrant culture using Creative Commons. To understand Creative Commons, you need to know a little bit about how copyright works. Did you know that when you create something, anything, from a photograph to a song, to a drawing, to a film, to a story, you automatically own an all rights reserved copyright to that creativity? It's true. Copyright protects your creativity against uses you don't consent to. But sometimes full copyright is too restrictive. What about when you want all those millions and millions of people out there to use your work without the hassle of coming to you for permission? What if you want your work to be freely shared, reused, and built upon by the rest of the world? Luckily, there's an answer. Creative Commons. We provide free copyright licenses you can use to tell people exactly which parts of your copyright you're happy to give to the public. It's easy. It only takes a minute and it's totally free. Just come to our website and answer a few quick questions like, will you allow commercial uses of your work? And will you allow your work to be modified? Based on your answers, we'll give you a license that clearly communicates what people can and can't do with your creativity. You don't give up your copyright, you refine it so it works better for you. Welcome to a new world where collaboration rules. It didn't even exist just a few years ago, but now there are millions and millions of songs, pictures, videos, written works available to share, reuse, remix, all for free. Want to work together? Then join the Commons, Creative Commons.
Okay, so you get the idea that is a type of copywriting. So these are a variety of the Creative Commons licensing. And as you saw there, the creativecommons.org website will give you a little more details, and you can actually click through and license your own material. This is really great when you're sharing lesson plans, or if you're looking at others' lesson plans to see if you're allowed to utilize it, if you're allowed to change it, if they want attribution or not. Some folks create lesson plans that they're not worried about getting credit for. As long as somebody's using it and it's helping students learn effectively, they're not concerned about it. So if you look over these three in particular, this is a Creative Commons license which wants attribution, which means you can use this, just make sure you give me credit. This is a Creative Commons license that's asking for attribution, is requiring that it is non-commercial, which means it cannot be used for money, and that there are no derivatives, meaning it cannot be changed. This one here is, again, attribution. No commercial, so no money can be gained off of it. And this is share alike, meaning once you have used it, I want you to share whatever it is you did with it as well. So the licenses vary, but this gives you an idea. Attribution, this one means you may share and adapt, but you need to give credit. Share alike, which means that you can share and you can adapt, but it should be under the same license as the original. So you need to make sure that, hey, it has the same license and that credit's still given to that same person. This NC means that while you can share and adapt, you cannot use it for commercial purposes, which means you can't use it to make any money whatsoever. No derivatives is this equal signs, which means if you remix, transform, or build upon the material, you may not distribute the modified material. So you can change it, but you cannot share it out to anyone else. Licenses also come in combinations. So you'll somebody attribution, non-commercial, and share alike. Hi, Cynthia.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Sorry I was late.
This one is, that's okay. That's okay. I'm recording. So anything you missed, you should be able to catch up with later. I'm just going over the share alike licenses.
Yeah.
So overall, this screen is probably the best one for Creative Commons licenses. I always say, save this image somewhere. Nobody wants to memorize Creative Commons licensing, including myself, though I have it from having presented this a couple times. So whenever you're coming across anything in OER, we're kind of look at the license and we say, okay, am I allowed to copy, publish this? How can I use this material? And it gives us a good idea of how we can use it and whether we can modify and adapt it. And if we do we need to share alike again? So once we get into OER, you're going to see what that looks like. So OER, Open Educational Resources, is oercommons.org. It's a great place. Their goals are to discover, curate, and author. So they like to discover open resources, to collect and curate resources, and you can actually author your own resources in it. One of the things that I like to call to attention when we look at OER Commons is actually the fact that everything on here is free, and it's kind of a free share all is what I feel like. Unlike some other resources, so for instance, is Teachers Pay Teachers is often something that a lot of educators go towards when they're looking for resources. OER Commons is different because it's free, it's built for that freedom of sharing. And a lot of the materials are vetted. They make sure that the Creative Commons license is correct. And there is an evaluative component where you can evaluate the resources and give feedback. And they're also standards aligned, a lot of them. It's pretty open, but I like a lot of that freedom. You know what you're going to get because you can look at the whole resource before you decide to use it, versus Teachers Pay Teachers, where I think a lot of times you get like a page of it and then you pay what you pay for it, and then you get it and you may realize, oh, this resource cost me $25 but doesn't even work for what I'm using it for. So it's something to keep in mind. So I'm going to go out. A lot of my slides in the slide deck are actually kind of placeholders that show you what you need to do, but I'm going to go out here to OER Commons so you can see where you need to go for everything. So it's oercommons.org. Put that in the chat for you. And to sign in and register is right up here. It's completely free. It may ask you to verify your account. So I'm going to sign in with me, but you can register up here if you're interested. I'm going to sign in so you can get an idea of what it's like to log in. And this is the very basics of OER. Once you have your login, you can go in and start searching right here for whatever it is you're looking for. You can search by subject, levels from preschool all the way through graduate, career, technical, and adult education, and you can go by standards. And the Pennsylvania standards are in here, which is always useful. Common Core works for certain things. They're very similar, but to have all of those PA standards is very, very helpful. Additionally, what I want to point out is down here at the advanced search. So initially, a lot of times when we search, we use the search bar immediately. I'm going to go into the advanced search because this is a fantastic way to really drill down for the piece that you're looking for. So in the advanced search, I can still do my keyword up here, but I can narrow down my search criteria. I can select multiple subjects. So maybe if I'm doing something that I want history and language arts to overlap with, I can do that. I can search by languages. So maybe if I'm looking for something in Spanish, I can do that. I can search by standards, use, material, which is really useful. So if I'm looking for something in particular, like I'm looking for a lesson, or I'm looking for an interactive or a game or lecture notes or a textbook, I can do that. I can then multiple education levels, multiple users. So I do want to point this out. A lot of the material on OER is teacher facing. So a lot of it's actually lessons. There is some student facing material, but it's one of those things you just kind of have to look at as you're going through. And then you can also get your media format in here, and accessibility is an option to search by as well. Conditions of use comes back to that Creative Commons piece. So if you're looking for something you have to remix or share, or that's no strings attached or share only, you can select down there so you can get the exact Creative Commons use you would like. So that's essentially how you would search for something in Creative Commons. But I do want to point out, I'm going to go back to my slide deck here. I have to click through a couple pieces. I'll come back to hubs and I will come back to groups. Again, I'm jumping through. I'll get to all of this. Is that we have created some LIU 12 tags that we will be using to tag materials. So our training and consulting group is actually going through and pulling the materials that we have that are already identified as tier 1 or targeted for math, literacy, and behavior. And we're going to start tagging materials so that you'll be able to search by the tag. So if you're looking for, say, Tier 1 Universal Math, if you use that tag, you'll be able to find resources. Now, we're actively in the course of doing that. So what I'm going to do is come up here, and I can actually enter that tag, MTSS Universal Math. Now, as we start to aggregate more resources that we've tagged, you can do that and then actually come down here and start selecting, like, okay, I want that, but I want it for grade 4 and 5. You'll be able to pull it really, really specifically on this particular page. But for now, I'm just going to hit LIU 12 MTSS Universal Math. And it's going to bring up the one thing we've tagged so far because we're just getting started on it. So it's already tagged. This one right here, Maximizing Area Gold Rush, is tagged for MTSS Universal Math. And if I click on it, you'll get an idea of what a resource looks like in OER. So a resource in OER usually will come up like this with the description. It has a rating. You'll notice here the 1 signifies that only one person has rated this resource. It has a nice little description, an overview of all of the information about the material, the subject, when it was added, what it falls under. It has its Creative Commons license here. Over here, you're going to find your standards. You'll notice that this one right now is aligned to Common Core state standards for math. And if I go through them all, it also is aligned, I think, to the Maryland standards, but it doesn't have the Pennsylvania standards. So that's also something that we're going to be working on with our training and consulting group, is trying to tag it and add the PA standards that may be addressed with it. You can leave comments. So once you've registered and created your own, so if you use this resource and you want to comment on it and say, hey, this was really useful with this group, or I modified this a little bit this way, and just leave a comment, that helps. So you see that somebody else has already commented basically how they used it. And you can also evaluate it. Now, a note on the evaluation is that it can be a little long. So I'm going to click on evaluate so you can see it's up with another dialog box here. Nope, and it's not going to give me up. There it is. And it goes over how to do it in through here with a step-by-step guide. But if I hit start evaluating, you'll notice that it gives me, I can evaluate it by a couple of categories. So I can evaluate it based on the alignment to standards. I can evaluate it based on the quality of explanation of subject matter. And there's a lot of different pieces. So you do not have to evaluate everything on all of these different pieces through here, but you can. So if you found that, you know, I really want to leave some feedback about the quality of assessments because I think that's important on this one, you could just click on that, leave feedback, and just leave it at that. You don't have to evaluate everything. In fact, some folks only focus on 1 or 2 of them when they leave evaluations. So I am going to point out that it is in there. And there's a PDF version down here too, if you want to print it out and have it for evaluating resources. So close that out. Down here is where you're going to find tags. So this is also tagged for a couple of other things like area, geometry. So if I searched those areas, it's going to give me that information as well. I think I accidentally clicked on one. So now it's, there we go. Give me a second here. Let's check around. So those tags will give me that information. I seem to have lost them. Oh, there they are. They're reloading. So this is the LIU 12 MTSS Universal Math. So anything we do tag will come up like this. And you'll notice I have an X there because I'm the person who tagged it. So if I decide later as the tagger, you know what, this doesn't meet our minimum criteria for MTSS Universal Math, I can exit out and it'll disappear out of that list. If this was a resource that I really liked, I looked at it, I was like, yes. I can also view the resource directly. So I'm going to click here and it's going to take me out to the resource directly. That was just kind of my overview page so I can see what everybody else thinks about it and if I think it's worth it. So if I go in here, you'll see that this is the full resource. I still have this little bar up here from OER, which gives me a couple of things, the ability to tag, link. I can share this out to Twitter and all of those. I can also post it to Classroom. But if I post it to Classroom, it's posting this entire lesson plan to Classroom. So it's not student facing, so it's not really, unless I'm working and I've created a Google Classroom for maybe all of my math teachers to collaborate, it may not work really well for that. And then lastly, I can save it directly. So I have my own profile set up and I have set up my own ideas. So if I save it, I can save it to my math folder and then this resource will be in my math folder under my Lincoln Intermediate group. Up here are my personal folders that I've already set up. So if this were something that fit into my branding or my podcasting or any of my STEM, I might want to save it in there. I can also create a new folder right here. So once you join a group, and that's up to you whether you want to, you can use it personally, or you can start to create groups based upon districts. So there are several districts like Conewago, Gettysburg, have already created their own district group, where within the district, all of the math teachers have collaborated and created a host of all of the OER resources they want to use, and they've labeled them by grade level or by unit, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of flexibility built into this resource for that piece as well. Are there any questions about this resource so far that you're like, hey, how does this work? Why does that work that way?
It's pretty amazing. Great.
You just stop me if I'm rambling.
Oh, it's great stuff.
So I'm going to, this is back at the homepage. So I just left the resource, came back to the homepage. So the next thing I kind of want to show you is those groups and hubs so that you can see. So Discover is a place that you can go for specific collections and specific providers. So for instance, if I go into collections, these are things that are curated specifically by Oer Commons. So you'll see there's already a CCS aligned mathematics that has over 2,000 resources in it. Engineering, there's a Folger Shakespeare library of 22 resources that for any ELA teacher that was teaching Shakespeare was looking for that content was here. Game-based learning, et cetera, all the way through here. That is in this piece in the Discover collections. You can also go to resources. And you'll notice it kind of has things labeled out by subject areas. So if I just was looking for business, communication, career, etc. What I'm going to do is jump over here to hubs. So the main hub for Pennsylvania is the Pennsylvania Association of Intermediate Units, PAIU, our OER hub. And any district that starts to create a group, we do ask if a district creates a group to reach out to us and let us know so that we can make sure that you're part of the PAIU, because the PAIU has collected and gathered resources as well. So this is the PAIU hub. And you'll notice we already have some elementary mathematics, science, and GSS resources already curated and listed in here by content areas. So K through 4, 5 through 12. We also have some trends and some professional learning resources curated. Additionally, up here, these are the PAIU resources. I want to go over here to members, groups. You'll see here is where you have all of the intermediate units. So you'll see Lincoln Intermediate Unit in here, as well as all the others. And if I go over here to districts and charters, this is where you're going to see all the districts who are participating across the state. So we have Chambersburg area, we have Conewago, we have Gettysburg, Littlestown, I think Spring Grove's in here, Northeastern. So there's Southeastern. So there's several different districts who are in here across the state. Tuscarora, Spring Grove, across the state are all in here and have their own Hannah Republic. So hopefully I didn't miss any of our districts. So all of those districts have their own hub, and all of their own educators are members of that group, and they can collaborate and coordinate in OER to collect resources that they've decided these are resources that we want to use, which is really, really helpful. And then all of those, anyone who's interested can also join our IU group where we're going to be tagging. So you'll see in here, I've recently worked with Conewago, so I have their resources. But I can also see Lincoln Intermediate Unit. And if I go in here, hopefully she'll load. As a member of this group, we've started collecting things. So in our math folders, we already have a couple of pieces in here identified. They just need tagged if they haven't been. So you'll be able to search by folder. I really think the tag's going to be more useful because you can use that tag and then go by your materials and pieces that you're going to be looking for. So we will be tagging. You can also go in here and join the group if you want to see what things are tagged or added. The groups allow for discussions. They allow for members to post things, and then you can also see all of the members in the group. We have several folks from across our Tri-County area in here as well. So there's a little more information on PD and training in here as well. my personal stuff, so I'm going to go over here to my items, is how I get to the things that I tag. So I just showed you my hubs, which is PAIU, my groups, and now my items. And this is where I save things just for myself. So I might curate things and put them in my items for now until I get a moment to sit down and collaborate with my group and say, okay, here are my items. I'm going to add them to the LIU group so that we can start tagging them and do it that way if I'd like. So for me, I have a couple of pieces. So in podcasting and blogging, you'll see that I have some pieces that I've tucked in there. Now, each of these folders, I can have one folder, but I can also go one more deep. So I could say, you know, K through 5 and go one deep. I don't think, nope, I can only go one more deep. So when it comes to organization, that's all the farther you can go for now when it comes to organization and adding pieces that you've found in here. You can also author material. So if you have a lesson that you already like, you can add that into OER. There is a way to submit that. And that's under the Add OER button. So if
I love it when it's simple, nice and simple. It is what it says. I like that.
So what's nice about it is, like, I can, if I find a resource on the web and I've already looked at it and I know my Creative Commons licensing, I know it's open and it's something that could be on here, but I didn't find it in here. Maybe it's a resource I've used for the last year and I've, you know, I'm just going through here. I was like, oh, I'm going to throw it in this folder so the other teacher who teaches 5th grade can access it too. And I see it's not in here. I can add it this way and just add the link and throw it in there. And then they'll vet it. They have a team that vets it and makes sure that the Creative Commons license is correct. And that's fine. I can also, if I've created something that I think, you know, this is something anybody could use, and part of this is not just finding other open things, it's also adding your own open things. It's really a culture of, like, hey, we're all in this together. Let's share what we've made.
That's great. Yeah, that's great.
You can go into Open Author and actually submit your own material. Now, again, it goes to like a little review group. They review it, and if it's good, it gets posted, and you should get an email that says as much. So I'm just going to show you the add link really fast. So it's as simple as adding whatever the link is. So I'm just going to fakie, because this is step 1. And then you describe it, and then you'll preview and submit it. So it's 3 steps if you already have a resource and you're not finding an OER. What I've found is 9 times out of 10, the resource that you're like, oh, it's not an OER, I've been able to find it. I go in and just kind of quickly look like, hey, did they already stick this in OER? Somebody's put it in there. So again, it gives you this Creative Commons, the authors, education levels. It lets you already identify standards in it if you want, and tag it and everything. It's a little more comprehensive than just finding it on the internet. It takes a little more time to put it in there, but once it's in there, it's already aligned. Somebody else can pull it. It's really helpful. So that's the basics. Once I hit next, it will just say, is this what you meant? And you kind of preview and check your spelling. If I go over to Open Author, there's a little more to Open Author. So Open Author will let you say, include like your Google Docs that you might have some of the resources in, and start to embed and upload. So you'll see here it just says add title image, but I can then insert a new section, insert my resource title. It literally walks me through what I need to do. So write your content. You'll see here where it says import from Google Drive or import from OneDrive. I have all of these options, including pieces that deal with equations. So for my math folks, I know I'm not the math person, but math is in here, including YouTube videos, etc. So like if it's a lesson that you guys have been using across a grade level and you know it's a good lesson and everybody uses it and you want access and you want it to be out there on the internet so that anybody can access and utilize it, it's a fantastic way of sharing. You can link in some additional resources, any instructor notes. So if it's meant to be a student-facing piece and you want to keep the instructor notes separate, making it as a module for Explore Digitally, I don't know, theme, and you have some YouTube videos, and then you have some links out to some resources, etc. And then you put your instructor notes in here, like make sure the students know this, this, and this before they move into this module, or another way to check their understanding would be to do this. So you can make it so it's completely student facing, or you can make it so it's completely teacher facing. Continue. And then I can keep adding sections. So if that one section wasn't my whole lesson plan and I need to insert a new section, I just hit and insert a new section, will give me another piece. So I mean, essentially you could write a whole unit plan in here, or at least pull your whole unit plan in here if you wanted to. But all of those, so if I hit insert new section, it wants to make sure that there's main content before I add something. So if I just do that, see what happens. So my whole new section arrives in there and says section 1. And I think if I can, yeah, and minimizes section 1. There we go. And there's my new section. So this is section 2. So I can just keep adding and building and adding and building before I submit it, if it's a piece that I've used before. And there's a preview and a next button. So once I've completed that, I hit next. And I think then it starts to ask me about Creative Commons licensing. Helping to stop me. I'll just type in some randomness. So this is where you type in your overview that we saw, that attribution to fill out that description page goes in here. Your subjects, your education levels. You can put in your educational standards. This is where you identify, hey, this is student facing, primary user, or this is teacher facing, or administrator, or parent, or etc. And then by checking this, you say, hey, this is original content. They will vet it if they find something that isn't original. If you're pulling from something that isn't original, they'll push it back to you. So when you hit publish, it isn't like it's automatically out there. And people will be able to evaluate it. So I always say share and share alike. If you're getting evaluations, evaluate a couple as well. That feedback is always useful. And I think once you need to. So it was a basic overview of OER and what you can do to both add to and discover material. Is there anything in particular you would maybe want me to look for that you're curious about what it might look like, or what have you, or questions?